EQ is one of the most important parts of mixing a song. It defines the balance of the different instruments, the tone of those instruments individually, and it also helps reduce a lot of the extraneous noise of an environment that a song is recorded in. If you get into the nitty-gritty, EQ can be a little bit complicated, but you can easily master the fundamentals of EQ. I believe that designing a 20-minute course could go a long way in helping an audio engineer begin their journey with EQ. In designing a course, I would have several important learning objectives. Those would include helping the learner understand the most important concepts of EQ, having them identify the different sound frequencies and their characteristics, and just the general practices and principles of EQ that will help an audio engineer mix a song successfully. 20 minutes isn't a long time, but I believe by approaching the lesson with learning design techniques, I can effectively educate the students in the skills they'll need to succeed. To do this, I would start with backward designing. Since the learning objectives were the first thing I identified when starting to plan this lesson, I would then start to assess what type of tasks meet those learning objectives. Another way of thinking about it is I would have to determine what acceptable evidence would help them complete the tasks. Of course, to finish this in 20 minutes, I'd really have to think hard about what is fundamental. What can I fit into 20 minutes to help my students understand these overarching principles? Once I figure out what is most important, what tasks I'm going to go through and tell the students about, I would then have to think about how I'm going to plan this experience. I believe an excellent way to start this planning is looking at Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy identifies the different types of learning, and when making a learning experience, we want to try to incorporate as many of those as possible so that students are getting a comprehensive experience. We do have to evaluate what type of knowledge acquisition is most appropriate for the knowledge or the skills that are being learned. And then in my case, I have to ask myself, well, what do I have time for? I might not be able to really get the students using the skills themselves. If there's only 20 minutes, I would have to go through most of it myself. Bloom's taxonomy begins with rote memorization or knowledge. To meet this level, I'd have to make sure that students knew the terms. Maybe not quite understand them, but at least knew them. The understanding part actually takes place in the next level of the Bloom's taxonomy, where the students have to comprehend and understand what the terms and facts mean. As one who got a master's degree in English, I think that language is really important and a lot hinges on it. I would be basing my lessons around specific industry language, and then I would hinge all the information around that specific language. Students would then have to apply the skills and analyze what they're doing as they're applying the skills. Unfortunately, I only have 20 minutes, so I might have to skip this, but actually I'm probably going to have to try to convince you to give me another hour and a half. I mean, why not, right? It's not that big of a deal. You just have to pay me a little bit more. Anyways, I still have to keep going through Bloom's taxonomy. So up next, we have the synthesis. So with EQ, there's numerous different facets to it, but they all are interconnected. So part of my lesson would be thinking about how I can communicate this to the students. How do I recursively, when I move on to a new concept, connect it back to a previous one? Last but not least, the students would need to evaluate the value of each skill. With this particular skill, this is something that kind of takes time because with EQ, there's both an art and a science to it, so there's some preference involved. But I do think in giving students the basic of the skill, they then would have a platform in which to develop this last stage of learning. All right, so that is my pitch. I hope you'll consider hiring me for this. My going rate is only $5,000 an hour, so don't worry, it's pretty cheap all in all. And I promise you there's not a better person out there for the job. Thank you for considering me, and I look forward to hearing back from you.